Cryostasis. Cry, oh cry, when you break the sleep of a terror. Blue and cold, peaceful sleep, leave them be. Call the elders, let them treat the terrors with careful dignity. Never touch a sleeping terror, for if you do, you will live just long enough to regret it. Unknown mounted. Of course we looked with a tiny bit of envy at the forerunners. But the Holy Book says the sweetest fruits come from the trees tended by your own labors, and stolen fruit will turn bitter in your mouth. We set out to grow as strong as the forerunners by our own hands, not by robbing the ancient dead. We aspired to be farmers of knowledge and wisdom, like them. Along the way they passed on an invaluable lesson, one that had cost some of them dearly to learn, one that stood us in good stead. When you meet a terror, come in peace, or you leave in pieces. It was a lesson some other races refused to learn. Battle Mistress Ziranothi, Dark Ages Fleet Commander. Oh, what a splattered mess you'll be, when the terror awakes and he can see. Pubvian Child's Rhyme. I have a deadly nightshade, so twisted does it grow, with berries black as midnight, and a skull as white as snow. The Dominion's cocky young sons would not let me be. They salvaged, without asking. Now they're buried 'neath a tree. I hunted without mercy. Those who took my friends, they'll never stop their running, for the terror never ends. Brascal 4, Brascal 2908, written in blood inside the hull of a fallen Confederacy ship, Second Precursor War era. For all the crimes that a terror may commit, there is none so heinous as harming a child, for they are innocent and pure, even those the terrors put away, in their various jails, judicial institutions, and halfway homes. Those very criminals, even in their state, they fiercely protected their young. The criminals convicted of crimes against their young. Well, suffice to say, even criminals can have nightmares. Trina ad warning. The detainee made me do it. Found scrawled on the wall of multiple murder scenes. Bring the pry bar here, the leader of the small group of scientists said. The assistant moved up, and following the scientist's directions, inserted the pry bar in the slight gap at the bottom of the rounded lid. It took 2 attempts, but the deep freeze-cold box was wrenched open. The box began to beep, an urgent sound, as small LCD screens lit up and began displaying data. "Bring in the gurneys," another scientist ordered the assistants. The assistants hurried to comply. Another one was back by the boxes holding the cylinders, looking them over. "What are they?" a scientist asked. "I believe they are an energy source of some kind," the scientist said, running a scanner over one of the softly glowing tubes. "I believe the light emanations are a byproduct of energy production. Remove them, we'll examine them, see what secrets they will reveal to us," another scientist said. The assistants moved up, removing the dark ones first and loading them onto a trundle. The scientists were excited as they pulled out the body. While there was frost, the body was limp, heavy, strangely not stiff with cold and frozen tissue. "Alert the xenobiology staff to clear a room for examination of 20 subjects," the lead scientist said. His hands moved up, and he rubbed his chest with excitement. "Intact terror bodies," he said softly. "Something never found. Not desiccated from exposure to vacuum or the elements, not reduced to skeletal remains, not even suffering from decay." Another of the boxes was wrenched open. Another female, this one with dark brown skin the color of old oak. The box began to beep, and again LCD screens lit up, and the strange runes of the terrors began flowing by. That one was loaded onto a gurney and rushed away. Shrokyuar watched as the containers were wrenched open. The scientists ignored the beeping, although too crowded forward to record the changes in the LCD screens. There was only 8 left when the last of the glowing cylinders were removed and placed on the trundle. the beeping from the already open boxes all cut off at the same time. Several scientists exclaimed in dismay as the text vanished from the screens. All of the remaining boxes began to beep. Shrokyuar noted that the text looked different, but he wasn't close enough to be sure. "They're thawing out. Hurry!" One of the scientists urged the assistants. The boxes were rapidly pried open, one after another. The last one held a large male, and Shrokyuar was ordered to help move it. It didn't seem quite as cold. The lips weren't blue either. But Shrokyuar knew to keep his mouth shut and just loaded the body onto the gurney. He followed the scientists through the passageways of the Terror Hulk as assistants pushed the gurneys and the trundles with the precious cargo. The path wound out of the massive ship, out into the compound that had been rapidly constructed. Following instructions, Shrokyuar wheeled the gurney across the quickset ferrocrete to the negative pressure lab that was covered with xenobiology markings. He wrestled the gurney through the hallways into a large area. Examination tables had been hastily set up. Instruments were being laid out. "Put the gestational female here," a scientist said. Shrokyuar could tell by the markings on his clean suit that he was the leader of the xenobiological team. The scientists moved the body of the female, her stomach large and protruding to the point that the navel was bulged outward as if it was herniated, onto the examination table. Lights were moved, instruments prepared, and a visual/audio recorders were set up and turned on. Each of the terrors was laid on their own examination table. Several had teams of xenobiologists eagerly waiting to begin the dissections. Heat lamps were aimed, and the bodies warmed rapidly on 6 of the dead and frozen terrors. There were 4 teams of 6 xenobiologists. "Veins are filled with embalming fluid that does not freeze at low temperatures," one stated. "Epidermis is 3 layers, thick and resilient. Beneath that is a layer of adipose cells. Veins are prominent through the cellular matrix of the adipose layer and epidermal layer," one stated. "Hair is made up of dead keratin cells extruded from small production glands consistent with standard follicles," another said. "This one has hair that is a type of fiber optic strand, with electronic implants at the follicle. Reason is unknown," another scientist said. "This one has mechanical replacements for its eyes," was stated out. "All subjects have some type of implant on the right temple. All appear to be standardized, same design," a technician stated. Staring at one of the terror's hands, the one he had helped move, he frowned. He reached down, curling the fingers into a fist and holding up the hand. The knuckles had pressure cuts that had dark brown sealing them shut. He took a picture with his helmet cam and set the arm down. The one he had moved was muscular, no body hair from the head down, and just hair on the top of its head and on the brow ridge right above the eyes. "Hey, get away from that subject," one of the xenobiologists ordered. Shrokyuar just moved away. He looked back as he moved back to by the door. That one looked different somehow. He wasn't sure how, he just could feel it. When the bodies were warm enough, Shrokyuar knew immediately as the xenobiologists and scientists went to work. Skin was peeled back from the skull. Bone saws turned on. Multiple combat drops, multiple sustained engagements against the enemies of the Dominion, had made it so that Shrokyuar felt he was inured to bloodshed and gore. He had killed up close and personal, fought with vibroknives and close-range weaponry. But he felt his gorge rising as the scientists worked. When one of the xenobiologists gave a triumphant outcry, Shrokyuar looked over in time to see the xenobiologist lift a miniature terror from the distended belly of the female. It was pale, bluish veins visible beneath the skin, its lips blue, its eyes closed. An umbilical connected the stomach to something still in the opened belly of the female terror. "They give live birth," the xenobiologist said. "The fetus is fairly advanced." The xenobiologist set the fetus on a separate table. I conjecture it would have been able to survive outside the mother. Shrokyuar turned away when the xenobiologist picked up a vibroscalpel, one hand pinning the limp, dead form of the fetus to the examination tray. Swallowing repeatedly, trying to put the sounds of dissection out of his head, he left the room, pushing down an urge to roll a grenade in behind him to keep the xenobiologist's company. Moving toward the open hatch to the outside, he paused briefly at one of the damaged walls. He took several pictures of the indents, then moved on until he got outside. Reaching up, he touched the side of his environmental body armor's helmet, activating the radio. "Central Communications," the voice immediately answered. "Games and Theory Commander," Shrokyuar stated, heading toward the low, squat building at the edge of the compound. The wall was built to bisect it. There was a pop. "Senior Archon Repclack, what do you want, Sergeant?" the GNTCO stated, his voice cold. "I wish to report to you something I am not comfortable discussing over comms," Shrokyuar stated. "Come to my office," the officer ordered. In a few minutes he was inside the office. The GNT officer was staring at a large 2.5D LCD screen, watching as scientists examined vast computer banks, ordering the technicians on how to remove the crystal memory. The Terrors used a cubical artificial crystal lattice to adjust molecular spin for their long-term memory storage. It did not depend on power and could sit dormant for eons and still retain the majority of the data. "What, Sergeant, prompted you to disturb me?" the Archon asked. "Two things, sir," Shrokyuar said. He moved up to the computer next to the display. "May I?" The Archon gave a stiff nod. Shrokyuar used the interface to move the images from his helmet data storage to the computer, then put them up on the screen. "These marks are all over the interior walls, especially in places that have heavy damage to interior components and structures," Shrokyuar said, tapping the image of the indent on the wall where it was being displayed. He pushed the corner of the image of the Terror's fist and pulled it over one of the indents. It lined up almost perfectly. "Do you see, Archon?" Shrokyuar asked. The Archon nodded slowly. Somehow, the Terror made those markings with its bare fist. If not that one, then another like it.
Shrokyuar nodded.
"See the pressure cuts? Those joints become prominent when the fingers are curled, which would make an impact from that fist devastating." "I see your point," the Archon said. He stood silently for a moment. "Your other point of data?" Shrokyuar took a deep breath, then just went for it. "I believe the xenobiologists are not taking due care in their examinations, Archon," he said. "Reasoning?" the Archon asked. He reached out and adjusted the display. The examination lab appeared. "They rushed to dissect the Terror remains," Shrokyuar said. "Each wants to be the first to discover something, to raise their standing," the Archon said. He nodded slowly. "They move as if they are racing. They treat the remains with disrespect," Shrokyuar stated as one of the xenobiologists removed loops of intestine from a body, holding the loops up and examining them. "Yes," the Archon said. Before anything else could be said, the Terror in the back, the one that Shrokyuar had helped load onto the gurney, suddenly rolled on its side, its arms curling. Its belly heaved and clear fluid burst from its mouth and nose. The Archon tapped the screen and the volume came on. The Terror gave several hacking coughs, seeming to vomit up an astonishing amount of clear fluid. The scientists had not noticed, focused on their examination of the Terror corpses. "Is it?" the Archon said. "It's alive," Shrokyuar said. The Archon rushed over to another terminal, opening a channel. The Terror sat up, looking around, blinking. Its eyes stopped on the female with the distended belly. A xenobiologist had his hands elbow deep inside the female corpse's torso. The Terror suddenly moved, and low, rumbling sounds came across the speaker as the Terror charged across the room, knocking down several scientists. It grabbed the xenobiologist, throwing it to the side. The alarm started wailing outside. The xenobiologists backed away from the living terror, who was staring down at the dead female. Water began leaking from the terror's eyes, down its face. For a long moment it didn't move, even as the xenobiologists began recording it, holding out their recorders. Several started to approach, then jumped back as it reached out to the body. It touched the flesh at the side of the empty lower body cavity, then looked around. It saw the small body of the dead infant on the tray and froze. "Archon," Ch.10 said. He suddenly had that really bad feeling again. It touched the dead infant, its long blunt fingers gently folding the skin back over the autopsy incisions. It touched the infant's forehead, then closed its eyes, one of the eye sockets empty, the tiny eye sitting in a small tray. Ch.10 saw the water running from its eyes thicken and the mouth move in a pained expression. The xenobiologists and some of the scientists moved closer, holding out their recorders. Ch.10 could hear them babbling questions at it, with some even commanding it to return to the gurney it had been laying on. The terror sunk to its knees, liquid flowing from its eyes. Its arms hung limply at its sides, hands on the floor, palms up, as it slumped strangely even as it lifted its face up. Its eyes were wide, its mouth was open as it gasped in great whooping gasps of air, and liquid ran down its face from its eyes. The scientists crowded closer. "Get troops in there, order the scientists out. I don't care that this is something they've never seen. Get them out," the Archon ordered. Without changing position, still staring up, the terror's mouth opened wider, and it gave out a loud roar from the lower registers of audible range. To Ch.10 it didn't sound like a word, or like the terror was saying anything. It sounded like pure agony, the kind of agony he'd seen on the battlefields. The Archon moved up next to Ch.10, staring at the screen. The terror was sobbing. Ch.10 knew it could be nothing else, as its wide eyes stared at the ceiling. Its head was back, on its knees, arms limps, hands on the floor pointing upward, back strangely both slumped and leaned back. Tiny tendrils of electricity played up and down its naked back, around its knees, around its wrists, as it sat on the floor and sobbed at the ceiling. The terror made sounds that could be nothing but distress. The speaker carried the sound. The sobs began to be mixed with a weird sound. High-pitched, repetitive. With a shock, Ch.10 realized he could hear it over his helmet's link, over the speakers in the room, from the phone on the desk, over the comlink. It was sobbing as it made the weird sound. He. The terror made the sound more and more, still sobbing, the sound mixing with the sobs. He. The corner of the terror's mouth began to pull upward, the eyes somehow getting wider even as it kept staring at the ceiling, as if it couldn't see or hear the scientists shoving recorders at it, shouting questions and order. "Get out of there, you fools!" the Archon yelled over the speaker. He. The terror's voice changed. "Archon," Ch.10 said. The sound the terror was making changed. "What?" the Archon asked. Ha, it sobbed. The sobs started to fade. Ha. "We should run," Ch.10 said. The terror suddenly erupted into a single, repeated sound as its eyes began to glow a dark red. The tendrils of electricity around its hands thickened, and the corners of its mouth drew up to expose all of the teeth in the world. Ah ha 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 ha.